What is up, Rad Potential YouTube, and welcome to another Radformational video here on the channel. This video is going to be a controversial one, and I say that at the very beginning because everybody out there has their own wicked way to do their own thing when it comes to premixing in your RX-7 rotary engine. And if you clicked on this video because you're wanting to learn about premix and dirt bikes, well, this is probably not the one for you, but the concept is the same. So, featuring my Kawasaki 2-stroke. Alright, so, first things first on a rotary engine, we're going to start with unpacking why rotary engines have a premix or a oil metering system on them and how that works. Then we'll jump into the whole premixing side of things as far as adding oil to your system. Okay, so on a rotary engine, you got the rotor, right here. Much like a piston engine, the rotor itself has a separation from where oil is in the engine to where combustion happens. Okay, and that is via these oil control rings. They ride in here. They keep the oil that cools the inside of the rotor and lubricates the bearings. It keeps that separate from the combustion chambers out here, right? So if you're super new to rotary engines, this is the rotor. It goes inside the housing. Fire and power happens on the outside of this, okay? So in order for compression, combustion, all that stuff to happen, right, you have to seal off everything. And these seals, your apex seals, side seals, corner seals, which I'll link a video on how to assemble a rotor that goes through all that. These seals move up and down. They're spring-loaded. They ride metal to metal surfaces, okay? Fuel, right, gasoline, diesel, all of that stuff inherently lubricates a little bit, but it does not lubricate enough to keep all this stuff healthy, right? And to keep all this stuff sliding around on the housing surface and not tearing stuff up, okay? So, what Mazda does, and what most two-stroke dirt bikes do, right? Two-stroke dirt bikes don't have any crankcase oil that can come up to lubricate the cylinder walls and help out. So two-stroke dirt bikes, you premix oil with the gas and it goes in and lubricates it for you. Same thing same thing on these. So what Mazda came up with is what's called an oil metering pump, right? Oil metering system. Two-stroke stuff has it as well. This right here is an oil metering pump. Disregard the little looped line, but you can see right there, oil metering pump. Now, where does your oil metering pump go on your rotary engine? The oil metering pump mounts to the front cover right here. Okay? Now, this is an FC front cover. So, yes, this oil metering pump is not the right one for that. This is for an old school style. This would have a bigger flanged, larger oil metering pump. This oil metering pump fits on a front cover like this. Okay? But the concept is the same. Now, how does your oil metering pump get oil? Okay, this is something that is very important for those engine builders out there, right? People who put these engines together without a lot of experience, okay? The oil metering pump gets its oil from this little baby hole right here, okay? This is the back side of the front cover. Your front iron is going to have a port on it, okay? Right here, this little port. Now, this is an FD engine, so this port has a sleeve in it. On earlier motors, earlier engines, the sleeve is not there. So if you just silicone your front cover on, you're essentially siliconing the oil feed for the oil metering pump shut. Okay? So this little hole here goes through the casting of the front cover there. It goes down the casting of the front cover here, goes across the front cover, back up here, and lubricates this shaft and feeds oil into the oil metering pump, okay, through all these little passageways. And it's pretty sweet if you're into casting and stuff. They've got an access port here where they drilled this hole. They've got an access port here where this hole gets casted in, right? So that's kind of why all that stuff's there. But the oil passage here, 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 into your oil metering pump. Once it's in the oil metering pump, right, it has to then get to the combustion chamber. So on your oil metering pump, this one's an early one, so it only has 2 ports. The later ones will have multiple ports, 4 or 5, or probably 4. And if you have an S S2 RX8 is going to have 6, I believe, but correct me if I'm wrong. So, for an old school 12A, it would have 2 ports. These 2 ports would then distribute the oil up into the carburetor, okay? So we'll go through the years here in a second. On an early model carburetor, you're going to have 2 ports right here. This is a Hitachi carb. A Nikki carburetor will have the same thing. There's 2 little brass fittings centered on the carburetor. That's where the oil gets squirted in order to mix with the fuel and go into your engine, thus lubricating the engine, okay? Now, moving to an FC engine or a GSLSE engine, right? You're going to have multiple ports on one of those, okay? And those have what's called an oil injector. So I'm going to show you. This is a GSLSE engine. You can see right here 4 lines coming off the oil metering pump. Those lines would go up and would distribute oil. Here is an oil injector. Here is an oil injector in the housing. But also, there are oil injectors up here in the intake for the primaries, right there. 2 oil injectors, okay? So, this oil injector looks a bit something like this, okay? Right here. So, the oil injectors are actuated by vacuum, okay? As the engine pulls more RPM, more vacuum, more load, it opens the oil injector to allow more oil into the engine. That is the same concept for all rotary engines. They all have a vacuum actuated oil injector, okay? So you can see right here the oil feed line coming in to this little banjo fitting. That then puts the oil in the center. As this opens the needle valve inside with the vacuum, it squirts oil out the very end of it, which I'm sure that you cannot see, but there's a really small pinhole in the end of that oil injector, okay? So, bam. So that explains the system on a 13B, okay? Taking a half a step back to the oil metering pump, because I want to just cover this for each one. The oil metering pumps on engines up to Series 5 RX-7, so Series 4 RX-7 and before. So all your 12As, GSLSE, Series 4 RX-7s are mechanically actuated oil pumps, okay? On the Series 5 RX-7, FDs, and RX-8s, they are electrically controlled oil pumps. What that means is there is an oil feed to the pump, but it's electronically controlled how much it pumps to the oil injectors, if that makes sense, right? Now, on the 12As and stuff like that, you can see as you hit the throttle, this little thing is going to get pulled up by an arm, and that's going to tell it to squirt more oil in or squirt less oil in, right? So on the later models, that's just electronically controlled, okay? So that's the system up to the oil injector. Now, looking inside a housing, these injectors just shoot into the primaries. Looking inside a housing where oil comes out, I want you to tell me in the comments below, do you think that the housing, the location in the housing, can you see it in this right here? You can see this little pinhole right up in here. So let me shine some light in there for you. This little pinhole right there is where the oil injector squirts oil out of. Now, looking at the wear pattern of this housing, can you see where the oil is coming out of the housing, right? You can visibly see that there is a line in the housing where it is significantly less wore, right? More chrome in that line than shattered from where that oil injector resides, right? So, would you say that that is an effective way to lubricate this engine? Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. Obviously, that 2 millimeter wide line is well lubricated, right? So, this is where premixing comes into play, okay? And where the newer style oil injection systems might fall a little bit behind compared to, like, say, a 12A, where it gets mixed at the carburetor. The fuel that gets shot in, which is atomized and is a vapor, is able to equally lubricate all the way around the housing, right? Whereas on an FC engine or an RX-8 engine, obviously you can see, or an FD engine, you can see the higher concentration of oil in the center here from the oil injector. Okay, so now that you understand why and how and what that works, premix, right? Like a 12A, if you premix your fuel with oil, the fuel injector is going to squirt a oil fuel solution out of it, which is then going to atomize and equally lubricate the entirety of the housing, right? It's what they're trying to accomplish here. But premixing eliminates the need for your oil metering pump system, right? So this is where this is going to get into the super touchy subject of how much you should premix and why and all of this, that, and the other, okay? And I'm going to caveat this right here at the beginning or the beginning of me telling you how much you should premix your engine and why and what and whatever, okay? If you buy or if you have an engine in your car, right, that is unknown, you got it from somebody, you don't know if they premixed, you don't know if the oil injection system was working, you have no clue, right? And you're having compression issues or it's already pretty wore out, right? There is a lot of damage that's going to be done to your engine prior to you getting it by somebody not premixing, right? Most times, and I mean most cars I get, right? You know, you can't afford the super fancy nice one that someone's well maintained, this, that, and the other, right? You buy the one you can afford, so it's going to be a little bit more abused, right? Most of the time, the damage to your engine, i.e. worn out housings, scraped up stuff, right, is probably already done, okay? So, if you go buy a high mile RX-8 and you're going to start premixing in it, is it going to fix any of that wear? No, it won't fix it. Will it prevent more wear from happening? Yes, but it's not going to fix anything from before. It's not going to make your car run better, start easier, or whatever, right? So, with all of that being said, so the premix that you're putting into your high mile car, it might not give you that what do you want to say, insurance that all of a sudden now your engine's going to last 10,000 miles longer if you didn't premix, right? I guess that's what I'm trying to say there, is that premixing on something that's already worn out isn't necessarily going to be super advantageous. Okay, so the next part of this little caveat that I want to bring into play is that most of us shop engine builder guys don't have enough time, experience, this, that, and the other to be able to give you a definitively scientific answer to this is how much premix you should run because this is how many miles I got out of this engine doing this premix amount versus this is how many miles I got out of this engine doing this premix amount, right? Car manufacturers have huge long studies about engine wear, metal on metal stuff, what oil's better for this, that, and the other, right? The whole deal. And you should say, or could say, Mazda, right, spent 40, 50 years running rotary engines. You would think that the RX-8 is going to have an oil system in it, i.e. the oil metering pump system, that works functionally better than any of the older cars because they've had all those years and done all the studies and had all the warranty recalls and had all these engines come back to them with problems, right, that they could address that, right, and that you would think that an RX-8 would be the best oil metering system out there ever, right? And with that, kind of got lost in my thought there a little bit, but what I'm trying to say is most people haven't had any long-term studies on wear and premix to be able to like definitively give you a scientific answer, right? So there you go, full circle back to what I said at the beginning. So what I did is I went out and I talked to all of my engine builder friends, or at least a few of them, and asked them what their premix recommendations are. Had they seen any engines that were better or worse wore than others from people who had premixed, etc., right? One of the, we'll say, case studies that I've seen is one owner RX-8, right? It's from somebody else. One owner RX-8. The engine was well maintained, always ran good, fresh, clean oil. It was used on the track. It was a manual car, the whole deal. And the guy that tore the engine down said the engine was the cleanest, nicest engine on the inside out of all of them with 80 to whatever thousand miles. And that engine had not been premixed in it at all. It was just ran on the oil metering system. So what that tells me is that if you keep nice clean oil in here and the oil metering pump system functions well, that generally it's going to take good care of the inside of your engine, right? Other guys would say that, like, well, I don't trust the oil metering system, and the engines they tear apart, if you have an engine that gets ran long before its oil changes and this, that, and the other, you're going to see excessive wear on the inside. But then also, if you have guys that premix, they could have premixed for 10,000 miles, but the 80,000 miles before would have already done all the damage. So, anyways, that's what basically, that one case study was one that was epic, awesome, like good experience, good thing to note. The rest of them were like, stuff was wore out, stuff was causing issues here and there, right? And the guys were premixing or not premixing would be like, well, I don't think that it actually had a definitive help or improvement for that used engine. Now, what I'm going to say, and what I do personally, if I build a new engine and I use new parts and I do whatever, then in that engine, I am going to keep premixing in it, because I want to see over the course of, if I even own the car for 20 years, if that engine, when I have to take it apart again, because it's inevitable, has any less or more wear on it than some of the ones I've taken apart, right? So I've taken apart OEM engines that have never been premixed, and then taken apart my engines that I do premix in. We'll see, I'm not going to say I'm going to have the best case study in 20 years. You check back on this channel. But if you... if YouTube still exists, but we'll see how it goes. If it's for what it's worth, if there's more or less wear, right? Okay, so now the definitive answer. This is what you all came here for. How much premix should you put in your engine if you have a functioning oil metering pump or if you don't? Okay, if you delete the oil metering pump, this is going to be the easiest one I'm going to tell you. If you delete it, mix 1 ounce per gallon of fuel. 1 ounce of oil per 1 gallon of fuel into the tank, okay? That is if you don't have an oil metering pump. If you still have your oil metering pump functioning on your engine, and this is where there's going to be some controversy. People are going to say, oh, just mix 1 ounce per gallon in there anyways, it's extra lubrication, right? Or, oh, just mix, what I'm going to say, if you do have an oil metering pump, put a ½ ounce of oil per gallon of gas in your engine if your oil metering pump is still functioning. Okay? And people are going to say, oh, just do 1 ounce per gallon, do a ½ ounce per gallon. And I'm going to say, too, one of the things that I think is that if you're just daily driving your car, right, and you're not beating on it, I saw a turbo engine come back to here that I tore down to do some porting on that was carboned up and sticky and just nasty on the inside, right? Had 2,000 miles on it when I took it apart to port it, right? We put it in, guy broke it in, brought it back. And the apex seals had crazy buildup on it. Turns out he was premixing 1.5 ounces per gallon, didn't have the oil metering pump, but when you're just lugging it around, breaking in an engine, right, you're not seeing above 4,000 RPM. You're not seeing a whole lot of heat get into the engine, right? All of that extra premix was gumming up the apex seals, and I think long-term that might have had, or might have caused some sort of an issue where we might have had a stuck seal, might have had the apex seal get stuck down or whatever, excess carbon buildup, right? Because carbon is unburnt fuel. It's not an effective burn of the fuel, right? If you're able to burn every bit of it and get all of it out, you wouldn't have any carbon left in your engine, piston engine and rotary engines alike. So I've seen the flip side of putting too much oil in, and that, kind of not really scares me, but just makes me be more of a believer in that maybe less is more in some cases. What I have seen too, and one of my other buddies here, their RX-8s, they don't premix any, their daily driver RX-8s, they don't premix at all, right? Both of those cars have exceeded well over 100,000 miles on that engine, given that they've owned the car since like 40,000 miles. Have seen well over 100,000 miles on those engines. But that's daily driving, right? I would say, too, in my race car, the rally car, when I was running the 12A, Bridgeport, all that deal in that, I premixed 1 ounce per gallon, maybe a tad on the heavy side, and it had an oil metering pump. And I didn't see anything crazy as far as like on my spark plugs, excessive carbon buildup or anything weird. So, but then again, that engine lived its life above 6,000 RPM pretty much every time it got started. So there's tons of heat, tons of cleaning it out. So, I guess, right, this video, my summation, my little rant here about oil metering pumps and your learning about your oil system in your RX-7, the definitive thing that I would say, and has been confirmed from a couple engine builders, 1 ounce per gallon, ½ ounce per gallon if you have an oil metering pump. And I think that's kind of the industry standard across the RX-7 world. I think if you're going to do it, this is my personal opinion, and I'm 25, I've only been playing with rotaries for like 6 or 7 years. This is just, like I said, this is my personal opinion, for what it's worth, right? I think that the premix stuff is a little bit overhyped, having been around engines for that long, or for this long, and breaking a lot of stuff. I think it's more important to premix if you have aftermarket, if you have hardened seals, if you have things that are going to be harder on this surface than what an OEM Mazda seal would be, right? An RA Super Seal is a much harder seal than a Mazda seal. And what that's going to mean is that there's going to be more friction on that surface, and that seal is going to tear it up more. So I think in those cases, right, your high boost applications, your hardened seals, whatever you want to call it, I think it's more important to premix more in that situation. So even if you have an oil metering pump, maybe put 1 ounce per gallon in there as well. I also think that clean oil is going to work better. So if you're running your car a lot between oil changes and you're running an oil metering pump, then you're probably going to see lubrication qualities go away as that oil gets used up more, right? So, food for thought there. My RX-8 that I got, that I'm going to abuse on the track a lot, I'm probably going to premix a ½ ounce per gallon with the oil metering pump. But like I said at the beginning of the video, that engine already has 100 and something thousand miles on it. So as far as I'm concerned, if it's going to break, it's going to break. And whatever damage has already been done is pretty much already done, right? That's just kind of the road you ride by nowadays when it comes to old rotary cars, is that there really isn't new ones. So you're just kind of getting whatever somebody left behind. But yeah, that's about that. As far as oil injection, just one thought here that I had at the end. Oil injection on aftermarket carbureted cars. On a Holly, sometimes you'll see they'll put a feed port into the bowl. So your float bowl site where you can set your floats at, they'll put a feed there and feed oil from the oil metering pump into each bowl on a Holly. On a Weber, there's little ports on the top you can put feed oil into. On a Delorto, same thing. But anyways, that's my thing. I hope that I can go back in 20 years and watch this video and be like, definitively, this is how much wear I saw on this engine that I built with all new seals, that I premixed this much for the life of the engine under these driving conditions, and this is how much wear I had, right? And maybe somebody out there is doing that, and I don't have that information. But I do feel like what we've talked about here in the last 20 minutes is valuable information for you guys to know. I think it's important, instead of just punching premix into your engine, to understand how the oiling system works within your engine currently, such that you can compensate for that how you see fit, right? Because in the end, I may be somewhat of an expert, but I still have a ton to learn about these things, and I just haven't been around them for that long, So like, I haven't been around them for that long enough to be able to tell you that in the 8,000 miles I've driven the engines I've rebuilt, that I have this much wear because I tore it apart. And I'd love to, if somebody watching this video has built and ran new engines. So like, back when you could get new parts, has built a new engine with a new housing, new apex seals, and ran it in some race car or something, and then torn it down, and has documentation, or at least can tell me in the comments, how much wear they experienced from whatever premix or oil metering pump situation they were running, right? That would be huge. And if I could get any of that information in the comments, I will gladly refilm this video and give put that information out there, or pin it, or do some way I'll get that information to you guys. So look for links up here. If this video has been posted for a while, I'll update stuff, or read the description for sure, because I'd love to have those case studies and have that information. I think that's huge for the Rotary guys. So, and just, out there's no one really that shares that stuff. I know there's people that have been building engines for 30 to 40 years. And, a few of the people I've talked to have been building engines for 30 to 40 years. And really all they can say is about the same stuff I just told you earlier. 1/2 ounce per gallon, 1 ounce per gallon. If you're really abusing them, I think for street driving, the oil metering pump system is probably okay. I don't know. I mean, they've put, like I said, 100,000 miles on RX-8s. I mean, you see most RX-8s going 100,000 miles, and most, we'll just say, layman people, non-Rotary people, right, that own them, don't premix for sure, So you've got to think, if Mazda's seeing that much of a mile count on, we'll say, 80% of the cars they've produced, is that what they've designed for, right? I don't know. So, or I would assume that they would go in and tweak the oil system to inject more oil. And that's another thing you could do too for the RX-8 guys, is that with Maz Edit, you can go in and turn the oil system up so that it injects more oil sooner instead of waiting all the way out. There's a table in Maz Edit you can change to increase the oil and oil metering pump output. So that might be a good way to do it. But I would caution you on the guys that say more is always better in that situation, because more might not be better if you're just lugging your car around the street driving it, right? Because I would hate for you to build a 2,000, 3,000 mile motor and flood the thing full of oil, foul a bunch of spark plugs, and get your apex seal stuck. So that's just kind of a, in my 7 years of experience, I did see that once, and that was a little bit crazy to me, right? And then also, too, if you're running like race fuel, E85, all that stuff, make sure you have oil that works with the fuel you run. There's special two-stroke oils for all that stuff. Just make sure you have the right stuff. If you don't, the things don't jive, and chemicals mix, and chemistry happens, and bad things happen, and yeah, don't do that. So, anyways, I hope that all this information was helpful for you guys. I did I did make it a pretty good point to go ask people about their experiences with Premix. People who had more experience with me, and kind of try to relay that to you guys in this video. So if you do have more experience than me, which I hope you do, at least now you're at least getting to my level if you watch my videos, we're learning together, right? That I want you to comment below and tell me your experience with Premix, and maybe an engine you've rebuilt, or an engine that you've been running with Premix and not, or this, that, and the other. Tell me your experiences, because I definitely want to know, and people who watch this video can go down there and read your experiences with that stuff. So definitely let me know your thoughts. Thank you guys very much for watching. We'll see you in the next one. Keep it rad. Man, I do really enjoy that this had some pretty good examples of where the oil metering system works. This one being a 12A, you can pretty much see it's in pretty good shape. You get a little bit of shininess here from that. Some carbon buildup will keep these nice and polished when you get some stuff build up around the plug holes. So, and I guess I can flip this one around. You can see the same wideness here. So the oil comes in the top, gets scraped all the way around, burned out here, so you won't see any oil get to this side here. So, good fun stuff.